Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me correctly. Welcome to this webinar entitled Call for Expressions of Interest Information Session, the UBDC. My name is Andrew McHugh. I'm the Senior IT and Data Services Manager at the Urban Big Data Centre, and delighted to welcome you here. We're in the midway period of our current Call for Expressions of Interest. So I'll aim throughout this session to provide a little bit more information about what the UBDC is, the extent of our data service, some information about our data collections, and lastly some details of the process for actually utilizing our services. You'll notice that there is a questions panel on your GoToWebinar interface, so anybody who has any questions, please type them there and I'll find time at the end in order to answer these. Everybody is currently muted, so don't be concerned if you're eating lunch or anything like that. The session should take around about half an hour or so, depending on how many questions may emerge. First, I wanted to sort of introduce with a little bit of a summary about the Urban Big Data Centre itself. We're funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. We're based at the University of Glasgow, but with a number of partner universities collaborating. You'll see listed on the slide there are universities of Bristol, Edinburgh, Reading, Cambridge, Sheffield, and also in the United States, University of Illinois at Chicago. We are a team of about 45 academic researchers, and we're supported by, I think, 7 administrators here at Glasgow and 6 data service team members, performing a variety of roles from scientific computing officers and data scientists with specialisms including geospatial data, administrative data, research data management, as well as IT systems administrators and curation specialists. We've got 3 primary objectives within the UBDC, developing novel solutions for using and sharing urban big data. This is what I'll primarily focus on throughout this session, providing high quality training and also delivering cutting edge research. And really the relationship between our research and our data collection is an important dimension of what I'll discuss. So our services, in summary, are sort of amount to several different things. We provide access to our own data that we hold within our collections, which we manage and which we share via our infrastructure. These are classified as either open data sets or other licensed data. I'll cover some of the categories of our data later on. We also facilitate access to controlled administrative data, those data with more sensitivities or perhaps ethical considerations that we have to take into consideration. We typically don't control these ourselves. Instead, we broker and facilitate access to them via a third-party safe haven partner. We also operate a data sourcing and procurement service. We have a dedicated budget available to procure existing data sets that are available elsewhere, whether from commercial enterprises or from government or other sources. I should distinguish this data sourcing service from perhaps what one might understand as more traditional data collection methods that may be more intuitive to researchers. We don't collect data in a research sense, instead identifying data sets that already exist, and we can either procure them for money or broker agreements whereby those can be shared more broadly. We also obviously seek to offer our own expertise to facilitate the use of your own data. And lastly, we operate a training program. Quite often these things are most usefully described in terms of what we don't do as well. So we don't actually fund research staff or other resources as such. Our scientific computing officer team has resources to assist with proposal development, data sourcing, and data management. To understand that the screen may not be getting shared properly, I do apologize for that. Hopefully you can actually see that now. So we have 3 levels of data. that we characterize as our own data collections, and also, as I say, those controlled data sets that we can make accessible or to facilitate access to. We categorize these as open data, which can be placed in the public domain with very minimal restrictions on usage. Safeguarded data, which perhaps as a consequence of the negotiations we've made to secure that data for reuse, have license conditions attached or other considerations. These can be things like limiting the usage of particular data sets. Some, for instance, are not permitted to be used for commercial uses. And lastly, the furthest extreme in terms of the sort of spectrum of sensitivity or limits to usage, we have controlled data. Typically that's data that could provide information about individuals, and therefore there are ethical or other sensitivities, and these have to be appropriately considered and dealt with. So if I deal with the first two categories first, these are the data that we typically are controllers of and that we make available directly. So we have a range of open data sets that we've aggregated from a whole variety of different sources. We have a CCAN portal, which is accessible via our website, and provides, I think, over 1,000 data sets currently. They're sort of tagged and topically described, so we have a whole range of different categories of data. We're obviously dealing with data to support research to solve global city challenges. This is sort of fundamental to what UBDC is intended to provide. And naturally, within the context of these questions, there's a whole variety of different issues that are worthy of consideration and issues for inquiry. So we have data sets corresponding to transport, housing, healthcare, many different aspects. And those sort of topical themes are reflected in the other kinds of data that I've described here. And I'll summarize each of these in turn rather briefly, given the constraints of this session, but I'll be more than happy to provide more detail to anyone interested by contacting me afterwards. Indeed, one can also visit our website where we'll find some more information about the data sets that I'll describe. I mentioned already that UBDC's research program has an important contribution to our overall data collections, and we have a number of different programs whereby we've produced data which we can make available for reuse. A very notable example is our integrated multimedia city data project. This has gathered a unique and exciting collection of data looking at urban life in Glasgow specifically. The idea behind it was to take Glasgow and urban life and the experience of living in Glasgow and assess that and reflect that through a number of different lenses to provide a multi-dimensional picture of life within Glasgow. So that necessitated a range of different data collection methods. Some of the fruits of these activities are already available to share. So at the very heart of the IMCD project was a household survey and travel diary. The survey was an anonymized survey covering attitudes, beliefs and lifestyle related to transport, education, technology usage, sustainability, a variety of different factors. A very rich survey instrument that covered a whole range of different areas. About just under 2,100 adults completed the survey from around about 1,500 households in the Glasgow-Clyde Valley, the wider Glasgow conurbation, stretching beyond Glasgow city centre to, for example, Renfrewshire in the west of the city. And the data was collected between April and November of 2015, and that's currently available. Indeed, anyone can actually use that data. We've licensed that with a Creative Commons CC BY license, so it's openly available for sharing. A number of participants within that survey then agreed to take part in further research activities within IMCD as well. So for instance, a subset were life logging and GPS devices, so we could track their movements and their experiences within I think a week-long period. Unfortunately, that data is currently not yet available. We're still resolving some of the ethical issues associated with that and processing it into a form that we can share. Colleagues within our computing science school here at Glasgow University also undertook a number of information retrieval exercises, again gathering data corresponding with Glasgow. The latter of these two has produced data that can also be shared currently. So we had a series of textual data sources online were the basis of an information retrieval exercise. A large part of the data that's emerged as a consequence is a collection of tweets of Twitter data originating from the Glasgow area. That's tweets that were geocoded with Glasgow or included particular hashtags or terms, or were from notable Glasgow-based accounts. The Twitter data provides real insights into citizens' behaviour, reaction, moods in context or particular times, and has already been used to aligned with, for example, meteorological or transport data to identify what people are actually thinking and what their sentiments are at times of particular circumstances. Anyone again can use this data. The quirk of Twitter's licensing terms means that we can release data not in a bulk wholesale fashion, instead using the tweet IDs to share, to ensure essentially that the data we share reflects privacy settings and that the current content that's actually stored and has been recorded by individual Twitter users. Move on to geospatial data. Indeed, much of the data within UBDC's collections has a spatial element. Spatial Urban Indicators program, again another UBDC data program, has produced some really interesting data with a widespread perspective across many urban centres in the UK. 14 cities are covered within the data, which include small area estimates of a whole variety of different factors. These indicators are based on an international standard describing indicators for cities. These are intended to make cities comparable and include things like the green space provision, for example, within a city. Anyone can access these currently. This is very much an ongoing project. Current developments, we're looking at labour market outcomes and transport accessibility and availability, but we're really keen to engage with people and identify where there are questions that they may have that we can take this program in really useful directions. Transport data, a very notable example of the transport data we provide is the Strava Metro data set. Strava is a social network for athletes and perhaps mainly cyclists, whereby users with a smartphone app record data about their movements, and we've got data that describes those movements for Scotland as a whole, 4 years worth of data covering Scotland and Glasgow specifically, and Tyne and Wear also in the northeast of England. This provides GIS compatible data with minute-by-minute counts of users' street levels and weights at intersections, so we can see origin and destination of trips resolved to census output areas. So this has proved a really popular data set already and has really potential applications in things like policy development for cycling infrastructure, for example, to understand more about how active travel is a part of people's lives, that kind of thing. Within the housing space, we have real interest here locally. A number of our academic members of staff here in the centre are interested in issues associated with housing. We've collected from two commercial companies a whole variety of current and historical property listings data. Nestori and Zoopla essentially operate as aggregators of property listings data, and say both cover sales and rentals. We have daily collections, so we can really sort of trace developments over time and over place. The one limitation here, which is worth noting, is that these data are primarily for non-commercial uses. And again, sort of in this very whistle-stop brief tour of our data collections, we can see some education data too. So we secured from UCAS a data set that comprises aggregated query data for full and part-time students. throughout the whole of the UK. There's a whole range of different individual data sets that comprise this overall UCAS collection. Glasgow, Scotland and the whole of the UK are variously represented among the data. The full specification, like details of many of these data sets I've mentioned, are available from our website. And as we go to talk more specifically in the following slides about the call itself, all of them are prominently linked from the actual call for expressions of interest. One of another thing worth noting is end-user licensing arrangements with respect to using the service. So prospective users of our data services are expected to sign an EULA, an end-user license agreement. And given the range of different terms that are associated with any given data set, these will typically be accompanied by an additional agreement, a sub-licensing agreement for use of these. Naturally, these vary in terms of the extent to which they are onerous. From one extreme, the open licenses like the CC BY license or open government license that many of our data sets have, to more restrictive terms, particularly where there's sort of a distinction made between academic and commercial research, for example, or the opportunities that you may have to reshare data or limits on what the outputs of those data can be and how widely those can themselves be distributed. Like with all of these slides and the full content of this webinar, more details are available on request. The last element of data provision, I suppose, that is our controlled data service. And we work with the Electronic Data Research and Innovation Service, or EDRIS, which operates out of the NHS in Edinburgh to provide researchers access to controlled data. So personal data, which is data that may identify an individual living person or obviously could do when linked with other data, obviously has really compelling and understandable limits in terms of what we can do with sharing. Controllers of such data may agree to allow others to have access for particular research purposes if there can be a public interest case identified for them to actually do so. Typically we don't acquire such data, but we do help approved researchers to negotiate access to the secure environment that EDRIS provides in order to work with such data. So in order to do so, researchers' experience and competence for undertaking proposed research would be assessed, and they would have to gain approval from our own independent research approvals committee, and more on that later. Data controllers themselves, of course, must provide approval, so therefore it's important to make a compelling case to those data controllers. In many cases, there will be additional work involved for them to make such data available. And lastly, researchers who wish to use this particular service must be accredited by undergoing an approved researcher training course. Now, we use the Medical Research Council online training just to ensure that they are aware of legal responsibilities for accessing such data. It's provided via a secure service. Often that can be available remotely, but alternatively it may be necessary to go in person to this secure service, given the sensitivities and the ethical considerations associated with such data. Also spoke about our data sourcing service, and I would really like to emphasize this one and encourage people to think about where there may be data sets that exist that they know about, that they've been unable to acquire, whether because there's a price tag that is out of their reach, or perhaps they lack the opportunity to engage with the controllers or the owners of such data. UBDC may be able to source and acquire data that's not already held in our data collections. As I say, we have a dedicated budget available to do just that. Again, requests and applications for us to do so will be assessed by an independent approvals committee, and the associated research activity surrounding that proposed data acquisition too. There's a number of different criteria that we employ when determining the appropriateness or otherwise of a proposed data acquisition. So we'll ask about the scope, its relevance to urban research. Is UBDC the most appropriate body to acquire it? One thing I didn't mention earlier was UBDC is one of several centres within the ESRC's Big Data Network. So there are other disciplinary specific centres that may, in some cases, be more appropriate custodians or facilitators to accessing such data. Questions of strategic priority, the extent to which data can be used and also reused. So we ideally wish to build collections that can be reused by a wider community. The availability of the research, its life expectancy, a level of required technical support, time sensitivity, legal and ethical issues. All of these are considerations, but we are very keen to receive applications and proposals to source data sets. One of the very obvious practical reasons why we're keen to do that is that the quicker we can acquire data, then the more time is available to actually utilize that and to get value from that. So having offered this very, very quick summary of the range of services we offer, and I want to spend a couple of moments just describing how to apply to use UBDC resources. So we'll cover a number of these different issues in turn. So we have every year 2 calls for expressions of interest. One is currently live, so we're very much in the midst of receiving applications. We've been delighted so far with the number that have come in, but we're always keen to see more. It's an important distinction to make here and a clarification in case there's any doubt is that access to data within our open and safeguarded collections, so for instance if one wished to use the Strava data or the IMCD data, we can generally arrange that at any time. Such applications or requests needn't just come within a call for expressions of interest period. However, prospective users of our data sourcing service and the controlled data services, and where there is additional contribution or resource implications with any given proposal, there must be an application submitted within the window of the call. Now, the current call will close on the 9th of September. The link here, which hopefully is legible on your screens, will take you to the form. It's a fairly simple high-level form to complete in this first instance. And once the eligibility and feasibility of any given proposal has been received, then there'll be a subsequent fuller application required. Now, as I say, drawing a distinction here, any requests that come through this form just simply to obtain data, we can typically process those and satisfy them and arrange for the data to be delivered quite quickly. Ultimately, the full proposals are evaluated by UBDC's Independent Research Approvals Committee. Among the key criteria are quality, potential for impact, and the appropriateness of use of UBDC resources. So these are the sort of things that are being considered in terms of the merits of any given proposal. In terms of eligibility, we really do embrace a very broad church of users, academics in any discipline, including masters and PhD students, local authorities or public agencies, government departments, third sector, right down to individual citizens, often citizen scientists. These are characterized as with an interest in using data to understand, improve their local communities. The biggest caveat in terms of eligibility perhaps is that we cannot support non-UK researchers. And again, drawing that distinction that I already made, open data sets and some safeguarded data, assuming the licenses are drafted in the appropriate terms, can be accessed by anyone. So irrespective of where anyone lives in the world, we can share open data and most of our safeguarded data collection too. It's these requests for data sourcing or to use the controlled data service or for more resource proposals with greater resource implications will typically be limited to a UK audience only. That's not to say we're in any way non-global in our outlook, and we are very interested in hearing about other opportunities for international collaboration as well. Just to sort of really emphasize the range of types of user community, we already have within our users examples of academics, local authorities, private researchers doing all kinds of interesting things with our data. And really, the final slide in terms of the call itself is to emphasize some timelines and deadlines. So as I mentioned, the 9th of September is the deadline for submission of expressions of interest. We'll aim to respond, indeed commit to respond to any expressions of interest within a 2-week period. So assuming one submitted on the very last day, then by the 23rd of September we'll offer a guaranteed response. Where it's simply a request to access data, we can then make the arrangements to provide that. Or where there are fuller proposals, we can advise the extent to which that's in scope and feasible, and in order to proceed to a full proposal stage. For those proposals that do proceed, applicants will be assigned a named UBDC support contact who will assist with the completion of the proposal, will help to flesh it out, perhaps identify whether there are other opportunities with other data sets that may be useful, essentially just complete a much fuller description of the proposed project, which will then form the basis of an evaluation which will take place in January of next year. So it's rather a long process, and unless one is simply wishing to arrange access to data, as I say, we can do that much more quickly. But we'll aim by the 13th of January next year to offer a notification of the outcome of any proposal. So that is really as I say, the very quick overview of our service and of this current call for expressions of interest. And the link there will be the place to go to get further information. Similarly, please do drop me an email if you're interested. I'll drop my email address into the chat just now, and I'll be delighted to look through and see if there are any questions. Okay, I have a number of questions here. First couple, slides are not changing should they be, so fortunately that was resolved. Someone said, "Hi Andrew, this is all very exciting. I'm working up a grant application to look at urban mental health. Is there anyone in UBDC who I can collaborate with?" So the point I made earlier on in terms of the call itself is not really a process to support research collaborations as such. Instead, the services are limited really to those I described in the course of the presentation. I'm sure, though, if it's Jayati Das Munshi, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, I'd be delighted if you want to write privately to me and we can explore where there may be opportunities here to do something along those lines. Another question, are your publicly available data sources, for example geospatial data, available to readily link into UK area codes? Typically these will be, that this will actually be possible, and indeed where there are, in most cases where there are issues to resolve or processing that needs to be done in order to make data interoperable, depending on the extent to which that's a more trivial or more challenging undertaking, then we can typically provide those kinds of services. If you have a specific data set in mind, again, I would urge you to write to me, offer an idea of what you wish to do with the data, and then we can have a sense, having kind of considered that, of whether it would sort of constitute a fuller proposal that would really necessitate an application through this call process. But typically those kind of things will be feasible anyway, and where there are modest modifications that we need to undertake to achieve those, then we can probably do that. Someone asks, is there a gallery of examples of the Strava data being used by researchers available? We don't have that in place currently, and ultimately we hope to provide exactly that. And an important thing to emphasize is when we share data, we don't see that as the end of a relationship, or the end of a conversation. Instead, that should really be the beginning of a relationship. We're keen to understand how people are using our data, and to then sort of build a feedback loop so that data can be further enriched by associating it with details of its usage. I know that Strava, the company itself who provide the data to us, do have a few examples of where data has been used. There's notable work that was done in the city of Seattle, for example, in the United States. And again, if the question asker wants to get in touch, I'll be happy to sort of share some links to those kinds of things. We will post a copy of this webinar, of the full recording, as well as the slides, and I do apologize again for the fact that a couple of those slides went missing early on. And for all those people who've participated, we'll send you links to both of those. How small are the geospatial small areas? One final question popped in there. Typically output area size, but they will vary given the range of different data sets that we have. But as I said before, most, if not all, of our data will have some kind of geospatial representation. But we have, again, dedicated GIS people here, and they'll be really happy to answer that kind of question in more technical detail. But hopefully this has been of some use, and I'm conscious it's been a very fast-paced presentation. So you'll have all the slides shortly, but I would really urge you to visit the website and take a look. Obviously, submitting an expression of interest, there's no obligation to pursue it, so even if you're just interested in exploring, getting some more information, either put in a note there, or perhaps more appropriately, just email me directly, and we can hopefully work together and achieve something. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Okay, bye-bye.